Hey, hi everyone. Good morning, and I need to do the attendance. And there has been some issues with Cyber Campus. I wasn't able to set up a any voting on Cyber Campus this morning because for some reason it's not accepting offers to set up a um, voting efforts to set up votes. But we can vote in Zoom. I've done that before, but so we I know that I haven't done it in a while, but I know that is feasible. But let's see if the attendance works on Cyber Campus. So we go to Cyber Campus here, and let's see. I got the I think yeah, there you go. So I go to attendance, and hopefully this will work. So we are in, let's see, I might have to get the right class here, American history. Go to American history, attendance, scroll down to week 6, add, and smart attendance. And your smart attendance number is 125. 125 is your smart attendance number. So again, I have to stop the share on this and go to Zoom and go to chat and type in 125 here so that we get that off. Okay, so that is done. And today is our short class. And that video series I've been showing you that's really, kind of good and kind of interesting, like just to show you again here. I can't show all of those sessions to you here because, there's many of those sessions, but they're worth watching. For example, we don't cover at all the American Civil War battles, the American Civil War itself, and the many battles. And That's important for. I was thinking about this morning for a number of reasons. Because also after this class, I teach a 2 hour American foreign policy class, and of course. I've been trying to think about why on social media that I listen to on podcasts that cover international affairs to hear get both insights and also to at least understand what more fringe, radical, militant elements of the American political system, the American polity are consuming and understanding and shaping their worldview on social media. Why a lot of some podcasters that I focus a lot on, I talk about in class, are not really spending much time are not are continuing, I should say, are continuing to argue that, for example, Ukraine is losing this war, that Ukraine against Russia is losing this war, and yeah, even though, of course, now it's been 3 years and 9 months since almost coming up to 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 24, 2022, why did these people keep arguing that Ukraine is going to lose, that Ukraine is losing, that Russia is going to win, that we need to reach a ceasefire, or else Ukraine is going to be destroyed? And I look for reasons why they make this argument when we're coming up to, we're almost up to 4 years of Ukraine resisting, and Russia has only occupied, 18, 19% of Ukrainian territory, the same as almost the same amount as it got, as it's had 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. And of course, I was thinking about I then came to think about the American Civil War, because of course, in the American Civil War, and this is highlighted in some of those videos that I'm not showing you, like this one, the American Civil War, which I haven't shown you, or the other focus on the American Civil War. The American North in the American Civil War was much more strong, had much greater power capabilities than did the American South, the Confederate States that attempted to break away. And of course, it was evident to anybody who was watching the Civil War that the American North had much more capabilities than the American South. So if I show you here. Um, Maybe if I go to it here, if we go back to the share screen, and I show you, for example, what was going on in, let's see, is this the one that highlights the, of course, in, okay. Oh, there's just so many of these god darn advertisements. You just can't avoid them. Um, well, I think I wanted to highlight one of these here for this. So this is maybe the, well, I'm not going to look for here, but for example, how how the American North had much more greater power capabilities than the American South, both from population size. I mean, the American North was at least three times the size of the population of the American South. The American North produced had 90% of the industrial capacity of the American South. It had three times as many railroad as miles of railroads as the American South. So and the important point I want to make in here is, of course, still the American South tried to fight that war, and they thought that they could win this war because they thought that the United States North, the American North, didn't have the will and the desire to fight the war because it'd be too costly. It would be too costly, and it was the American North didn't want to pay that cost of trying to take the South because the South was on the defensive. The American South more motivated, would be more motivated than the American North because they're fighting for their so-called way of life, and they were on the defensive against the North, which would have to conquer the American South, which always takes more resources, right? Much more resources than if you're on the defensive. That the American North didn't want to pay these costs, particularly of this notion of having to fight this war supposedly for the of course, is being portrayed, as a war about slavery. That the American North was not, they didn't like black people often as well. They had negative stereotypes of black people to fight, supposedly to end slavery for black people and lose lots of American white boys to fight that war. It wasn't something that supposedly the American North would want to pay the price to do. And of course the South was wrong, but the war lasted 4 years, and of course the American North, the North in the American Civil War did win, but the war lasted 4 years, and it was the bloodiest war that we had seen in the modern world until that time. Napoleonic wars, they were, of course, 60 years earlier, the Napoleonic battles, they were very bloody, but they were not like what we've seen in the American Civil War, right? The American Civil War lasted for 4 years, and it wasn't expected that it would last that long when the war started. I mean, there was good reasons why Lincoln wanted to avoid war, because you never really know what's going to happen with war when it starts, right? I mean, you never really, I don't know, it should make such bland, general, bold statements, but it was a war that when a war begins, it could go many ways, right? But the war was incredibly destructive. And I think it was maybe more destructive than most people realize. I could say that with confidence. And it was around 700,000 people died in the war. That's not including the people that were wounded. 700,000 people died, adding together the North and the South battles. And of course, half of those, maybe more than half of those people who died of disease. They didn't die of bullets and artillery, a cannon, but they died from disease, which the germ theory of disease would be developed later after the American Civil War was over. So um, but still, I mean, but it lasted 4 years, but it lasted 4 years because of the role of industrialization, right? You begin to see the impact of industrialization on warfare and the movement to wars of attrition, which again, it's the whole story about the Ukraine-Russia war. It's supposedly a war of attrition. Became a war of attrition, and the American North ground down the American South in that war, even though the American South had at the beginning of the war better generals. I mean, that was supposedly one of the advantages of the American South, of course, is not only they had greater morale to fight, to defend themselves against the North, which would have to conquer them, but also they had a stronger military tradition, that their officers were better. And that was true for the first part of the war. And of course, during the first couple of years of the war, the American North lost most of the battles, but they eventually won because they finally got themselves organized, and and American morale was strong in the North as well to stop the destruction of the United States, the breakup of the United States. So again, as to how this relates to the Ukraine-Russia war, I mean, it's the same point that I think you would have to make is I look for people to explain to me why through over almost 4 years into this war, people like John Mearsheimer or Andrew or Michael Ho or other people that are all over or Mike or Glenn Beason all over social media that I listen and watch on YouTube. They say, well, Ukraine's going to lose this war. Ukraine's losing. Nobody mentions the American Civil War, but that's what I think you should mention if you're going to claim that, well, Ukraine is going to lose. Because first off, they would argue that, well, first off, Russia has not fully mobilized for this war, right? It's not called up all people that are eligible to fight or make them eligible to draft them. They have done some of that at the beginning of the war in 2000, full scale war in 2022. But what Russia's been doing has been using volunteers, encouraging them with lots of money, encouraging getting prisoners out of prison by saying that they could get out of prison if they join the military to fight the war. Sometimes they've tried to coerce people, but the point is that Russia has not fully mobilized for the war, like the American North did not fully mobilize for the war against the South. The American North did not fully mobilize for that war against the South. There was not there was some conscription. There was some forced efforts to make people join the U.S. Army in 1863, but that was not the main source of personnel that the American North relied upon to create the Northern armies, the Union armies that went against the Southern armies. It was mostly volunteers. People were paid. It was, of course, also after the Emancipation Proclamation, encouraging freed Black people who Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation freed, that they could join the military. And he makes the point that 180,000 Black soldiers were in the American Northern armies fighting with the American North, the North armies, the Union armies against the Southern Confederate armies. But the point is that there was not really full mobilization. There was not a full-scale mobilization of the North. And the North eventually won after 4 years of war that just ground down the South. The South was conquered and it couldn't generate the resources that it needed to continue to fight. That's what you might make an argument about. What if you're going to continue to make this argument that Russia is winning the war and will win the war now that we're already almost 4 years into that war. And again, the American Civil War lasted 4 years, right? That you might make a claim that, well, look at the American Civil War. But the point is that nobody ever, I haven't seen anybody make a reference to the American Civil War as a way by which you would continue to argue that now we're in 4 years into this war, Russia's not conquered Ukraine. Russia's not taken, put a government, a puppet government in power in Kyiv. Russia's not taken major cities like Kharkiv, Odessa, and Kyiv itself. That you would say, well, if they're winning, you're saying that basically Russia does not want to fully mobilize because that causes political issues and challenges for Russia with its relationships with the West as well. It's going to, really affect Russian domestic politics in ways that Vladimir Putin and his authorities, his elite cohorts, his elite colleagues do not want to do it this time. I mean, there are people on the right, farther more militant Russian figures that want Putin to mobilize fully, like this person he's put in prisons, this man named Strelkov. His name is Girkin. He was involved in the uprising in the Donbass in 2014 that started this war before the full-scale invasion of 2022. They're attacking Putin for not mobilizing all Russians to really go at Ukraine. So, but that's the point to keep in mind, that Russia is not fully mobilized for this war, and the American North never fully mobilized for the war against the American South, but they eventually won because they were motivated and they had tremendously greater resources to use against the American South in this war, and they did enough to win the war. But I have to tell you, I mean, people were shocked about how long and violent this war was, and of course, that's the impact of industrialization. I mean, battles of Napoleon. For example, I was looking up things, for example, on Google Gemini here. If you look, for example, Napoleon's battles lasted typically like, for example, I looked up here, scope of Union mobilization. The North did not fully mobilize its resources in the same intense, all-encompassing ways the Confederacy was forced to, but it did engage in an unprecedented transforming mobilization effort, right? So it was often characterized as one of the first examples of total war. Um, um, but it never had to fully utilize the full extent of its massive advantages. So the Union mobilized between 2.1, 2.6 million, but it had more. It relied mostly on volunteers. There was some drafting, but it wasn't a big focus of that. But it did cause some trouble for the North, right? The New York City revolted because they didn't want to be drafted to fight in the war. And of course, that was a theme in a Scorsese film that came out in 2003, Gangs of New York. Um, yeah, the North had a huge advantage, had 92% of the union's manufacturing capacity. You had greater financial resources available, more infrastructure in contrast with the Confederacy. And so you can see this comparison. And of course, the impact of, and so of course, eventually the North did win because the South gave up because they ran out of resources, basically. Um, but they were obviously they're motivated to fight these Southerners. As I told you, most of those Southern soldiers that fought and died or lost their leg or arm or whatever in that war, they obviously were motivated, even though they didn't own slaves. Most of those soldiers didn't own slaves, which is pretty striking when you think about what would the legacy be for our debate about the legacy of slavery to the extent there is a legacy of slavery. Of course, and also, but to continue with my point here about, for example, the impact of industrialization on warfare, for example, the Battle of Gettysburg lasted 3 days. Whereas, of course, you can see, you compare, for example, the Battle of Austerlitz, one of Napoleon's brilliant victories in the Napoleonic Wars 60 years earlier. It lasted 9 hours. It didn't last 3 days, it lasted 9 hours. Why? Well, because in Gettysburg, well, now we have railroads. You can supply your armies as they're in battle, right? You saw the emergence of trench warfare that you would see in the First World War, trench warfare, and at the first stage of the Russian full-scale invasion. You saw also emerging towards the end of the American Civil War, trench warfare in putting up in fighting and putting up sieges around cities like around the Virginia capital Richmond at the end of the war. So just to and of course the Europeans got to see the full impact of industrialization on their war fighting with the First World War. And so like how long oh, I forgot to show you here. I forgot to share the right screen. So if I go to Gemini, yeah, this is what I was showing you. See, that's what happens. You forget that they have to share the right screen. So you can see here the scope of mobilization of the North versus the South, contrast with the Confederacy. Yeah, the Battle of Gettysburg was 3 days. The Battle of Austerlitz was 9 hours, right? And so I forget what was I going to put in here, like, but I was going to type in something else to show. Yeah, how long did the battle, of Verdun last in the First World War, which is the most bloody, horrible battle perhaps ever in world history. The Battle of Verdun lasted, it says here, 10 months. I thought it was 6 months. So 9 months, almost 10 months. And again, that's the impact of industrialization. And that was intentional, right? That the German high command thought, well, to end this war, we have to bleed the French to death. And we're going and in this war of attrition, these typical wars of attrition, right? Typical, but that's what we're seeing. And of course, that's supposed what's going on between Russia and Ukraine today by those people who argue that Russia's winning this war, that Ukraine is going to run out of people. They're going to run out of men to fight, and they're going to eventually start collapsing. So I guess we'll see. Of course, the Ukrainians are really motivated. I mean, they're really motivated because they have a sense. They know what happened in Bucha, the massacres that happened in Bucha, that Russian forces are prone to do to them, Ukraine, what they did in Bucha when they occupied that area. That they might have plans that look similar, or they might behave towards them the way that Israelis are acting towards the Palestinians in Gaza. They want to erase Ukrainian national identity. So, and of course, and so they have a really strong motivation to fight. right? Because Russia intends to erase that, at least the part of Ukraine that they occupy. Maybe they'll leave the western part of Ukraine on the border with Poland out because those are the militant Ukrainian nationalists. That is the heart, the beating heart of Ukrainian identity, national identity, where the Catholic Ukrainians are concentrated, right? That used to be part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire before that fell apart after World War One. But then again, who knows what Russia will do if they, I mean, they did take back that part of Ukraine after they defeated Germany, beat back the German army in World War II. They took all of Ukraine and added more territory to Ukraine. And they put down that insurgency that resisted the Soviet communists coming back after the Soviet communist, the Red Army beat back the German Wehrmacht, beat back the German military. And they succeeded in putting that down. And Nikita Khrushchev, who became the leader of the Soviet Union after the death of Stalin, and he defeated his political rivals to become the leader of the Soviet Union in 1956. That was his job, to put down that Ukrainian resistance that continued well into the 1950s. Right? They did it before, and they might tell themselves in their brains, we can do it again. So maybe they will try to go after Lviv. I mean, but we don't know because of, but John Mearsheimer is right that these conflicts, these wars escalate as you lose more and more resources in terms of men and people, and you become, and if Ukraine does suddenly start to collapse, the Ukrainian military starts to collapse, who knows what Russian trends and behaviors are going to show as they start moving forward more rapidly than they have until this time. But until this time, they're gaining ground every day on the basis of just some meters, not kilometers, just meters. So some people say, no, 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 Ukraine's winning. Ukraine's winning. Ukraine is winning because Russia's going to run out of resources. And I mean, that's the kind of debate that's going on right now as we speak. Is Russia winning or losing? Is Ukraine, Russia winning? And those like John Mearsheimer say Ukraine is losing. They look at the First World War, right? They look at World War II. But nobody mentions the American Civil War. And they should. They should. Because again, they say that Russia's not fully mobilized. Russia wants to grind down Ukraine and do it this way, the way it is doing it. Maybe. But again, like the American North did not fully mobilize for that war to defeat the South. And the war lasted 4 years to most people's surprise, right? To most people's surprise, I think, that it would be that bloody, that horrible, and would last that long. But the North eventually won. So, and so I'm going off. Well, we have to do our debate, and we have a class debate this time because nobody signed up for this debate. So we want to give you a chance to use your paragraphs that you wrote. So again, is there anything here I want to highlight in terms of? Well, maybe we should just go straight to the debate. So we go to stop share, and we go back to share, and we go to here, and we go here, and you can see the debate topic. To CUK students, Zinn's analysis implies that enslavement and its cultural legacy means that in reality today, American society is exceptionally cruel to its poor people in comparison with other developed countries like South Korea. Fortunately, I set up the question for this, to vote for this, a couple days ago. So, like I told you, there's been some kind of issues with Cyber Campus. I can't set up exercises, votes this morning. It says error occurred. Please contact administrator. But I did do this before, so I go here to. Hopefully, it'll show up here. Yeah. All right. So we go here to Zinn's out. Okay. So, and it is working. It appears to be. So, would you please vote on the topic that to Zinn's analysis implies that enslavement and its cultural legacy means that, and I'll make sure you're seeing the right thing that I'm seeing. Yeah, nope, you're not. So I have to stop the share and go back to share screen and go here and go here. Hey, by the way, I'm not going to check the chats. I mean, because people might be just chatting with each other. If you got a question, please unmute yourself and ask me, so I can hear you, because I don't want to go back to look at the chats because I don't know what people are chatting about. So if they're just chatting among themselves. So you got a question, unmute and say something, but please vote on this topic as to you think that Zinn's analysis implies that enslavement and its cultural legacy means that in reality today, American society is exceptionally cruel to its poor people in comparison with other developed countries like South Korea. So please do that. And of course, this is not anonymous. So we've got 7 people have voted so far. And so we want to encourage you to vote. So I don't know. I don't even know if I can edit this because, like I told you, there were some strange things going on with Cyber Campus this morning. And so if I go to edit and so it's now 9:26. So we make it 9:27. I'm sorry, 9:27. And uh, and so 9:28 here. And we say save. Will it work? So far, so good. So please vote. So you have 9 Pro. Nobody's going to be con. I mean, I wrote, from a different perspective, to try to give you an argument about how America is not exceptionally cruel to its poor people in comparison to other developed countries like South Korea. But I don't think I convinced anybody in my comments that I wrote in response to your paragraph. So, well, let's see how you voted here. So you're going to have to unmute um, your your mics because I'm going to have to ask you to speak here. So how about this? I don't know if I really want to try to do this. Let's see if I can do this with because let me see if I can do this. So let's see breakout rooms and no, I don't think I want to make a breakout room because I have to assign you. Uh, assign manually or let participants choose rooms. So if we make um, well, I'm going to assign you manually. So assign you manually to 4 different groups since everybody's pro. Nobody is so assign let's see 1, 2, 3. This is so cool. Let's see. So how many people we got here today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13. So if we make 4 groups, so 4 groups, so we'll just say 3 here to room 1 and assign to room 2. We go eh, 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 and okay, and then go to room 4. I've never done this before. Well, at least I don't remember doing this. So we go to room 3 and then to room 4. I assign the last. So there's your groups here, and there you can see you're assigned, right? You can see the groups that I've assigned you to, I think. And since and now I have to assign somebody from each group to speak. So we have 3 people in each group, so I can just go to. Let's see if this works. I go to Gemini and I try to ask it a question, and I don't know if it's going to. Um, so Gemini, pick a number between 1 and 3, and pick the number between 1 and 3. And it's not doing what I thought it might do. Um, I thought it would. It didn't do that, but it does this on Microsoft. So if I go on Microsoft Copilot, so I go to Microsoft Copilot and I say to Copilot, just a second, because we want to use the technology because the technology is really cool. And click on okay. Stop. And you all hear that? I think you can all hear that, right? She speaks with an African American accent as a young Black African American woman. So, co-pilot, please pick a number between 1 and 3. Co-pilot, pick a number between 1 and 3. You can't do that in Gemini. At least I don't know how to do that in Gemini. But that was entertaining. So she's picked number 2. So we go back to co-pilot and the breakout room. So the person who's going to speak is the second person. So Chloe, you're going to speak in group room 1. Imamura Yuna, you're going to speak for room 2. Marilu Rikome, you're going to speak for room 3. And Vaikaran, you're going to speak for room 4. Okay. So I'm going to open up all the rooms. And so you talk to each other and help Vaikaran and Marilu and Imamura and Chloe to be prepared to speak on the topic, and then I guess I got to play con because nobody else is going to be con, and then let's and then give other people the chance to speak. So let me open up the rooms. Please, please join the rooms. Please join the rooms. Please join the rooms. Please join the rooms. Okay, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out these buttons here. So please join the rooms. And so you've got a couple minutes to prepare your position. And that person will be the first person to speak. Of course, this is our short class, so we don't have too much time. Now I've got to pick a I've got to pick a number, but I got to decide my position. So if I go back to the uh, uh, the uh, um, the vote and decide for me myself what's my position. So heads, well, I'm going to be con or neutral. I'm going to be neutral, con, or strong con since you're all pro. So heads, I'm neutral, and it is tails. Heads, I'm for, and it is tails. So I am con on the topic, and so I have to prepare my statement as to why I'm con, which I've already kind of did already uh, a couple days ago. So please prepare your statements, and I'm looking for a piece of scrap paper to write down on, and in my office, I don't have much scrap paper here available, but I can find it, of course. So please prepare your statements. Hey, hi everyone. So, who's going to speak first? You want? I'll wait for to say my statement until we get somebody speak from yours. So we go back then to. Uh, um, I have to pick a number between one and four. So let's ask a co-pilot. Pick the number between one and four. Okay, so she picked three, and so that means we go with group three, and that means group three, Mary Lou Ricombe. Please give us your group statement as to why you are pro.
Yes, so at first, and as Zin say in and demonstrated in his book, the slavery established such a racial and economic hierarchy that persists on the society still today. Also, the slavery lets a huge impact on the society and encourage through that it encourages the stigmatization of poor and people and racial people. And in my opinion, South Korea places greater value on social responsibility and community cohesion. But there is also a huge division between rich and poor people in South Korea, but it's very less violent, I think.
Okay, so let me read you what I wrote. I am fine on the question because the U.S. emphasizes individualism in its socialization of its citizens, so as they do not view themselves as members of class groups. We Americans celebrate individualism, and so we don't look to the American government to solve our problems. We look to local institutions to solve problems, like charitable institutions, like churches, and so on. So we do not incentivize people in America to be unhappy because class group hierarchies can never be equal in social status. Right? You have a aristocracy, and you've got workers and peasants, and they're never equal, and they'll never feel equal. So they're never going to be as happy as Americans. You Europeans and Asians are never going to be as happy as Americans, because as I said, happiness is a state of mind. You might think these people are foolish or brainwashed, but that's more judgmental rather than as a scientific statement. Social group hierarchies in Europe and Asia can never be equal. So Europeans and Asians are more unhappy than Americans. Okay, so let's now go back to Copilot here and ask Copilot to pick a number between one and three, I guess now. Stop. Pick a number between one and three. Pick a number between one and three. Okay, so and so we go back to, so she picked two between numbers one and three, and of course I'm looking for uh the okay. So we had group three, so one and three she picked two. So that's Imamura Yuna. Please speak as to why your group is pro.
Because according to Jean, um, farmers who resisted land control was suppressed by law, and although the class of small landowners expanded, the fundamental wealth gap remained, and even after slavery was abolished, white workers continued to face strict exploitation under the power of capitalists. Mm, that's the reason why we chose
So
flow.
how do you and then let's see other groups. So you're saying, of course, that they're unhappy because, of course, they're crueler because, of course, we saw implementation of segregation. The typical name for we give is Jim Crow, because of this view that black people are so different and inferior from white people. They can't be allowed to mix with white people because white people become inferior by being associated with black people. And that, of course, has been instituted. So that shows that they're more cruel to their poor people. But of course, you saw from that video we highlighted about how by the end of the century, the majority of people who were poor farmers in the South were white people. So let's go then to the other two groups. And of course, I don't know how much I want to continue to play around here with Copilot because I can just flip a coin. And so let's see if it does this faster. Pick a number between 1 and 2. Thank you. Okay, so we go to number 2, and that number 2 would then be the group 4. So Vikaran, please, Vikaran, why is your group pro?
So yes, we can say that the American society is exceptionally cruel to its poor people because the legacy of the social hierarchy present at the time where slavery was present is still kind of present in today's America, as we can see with the big problem of racism that is present in American society. And I believe it is a diversion to keep people unaware of the real problem, which is the system as it was before. Also, from the beginning, the US government protect and serve the interests of the wealthy rather than the working people. So that's why we can say that if we compare it to other countries like South Korea, the United States does not help as much the less wealthy because they don't have as much social safety nets and they prioritizes individualism and they neglect the poverty problem in the country.
Okay. Of course, before I forget, I should make this counter argument, right? If you're going to argue that black people, that poor people and poverty is associated with race, and so America is crueler to its poor people because of the legacy of enslavement and the association of the worst poverty with the enslaved people, and the tendency to want to justify that relationship by believing that poor people are poor because they're bad people. That's why it's okay to enslave them, whether because they're not Christians, as you know, because they're taken from pagan Africa or whatever original reasons. Then, if that's the case, and America is such an intensely racist country, how could this United States have elected a black man twice to be president of the United States? Barack Hussein Obama was elected in 2008 and reelected in 2012. So if Americans are so cruel to people who are poor, and what, I don't remember, like 11, 15% of the American population lives below the poverty line. How can they, if there's such racial consciousness, such racial association, and cruelty that Barack Hussein Obama would become president of the United States twice? And so, Chloe, what's your response to that? Please speak for room 1, Chloe.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we discussed about how enslavement still has an impact today, emphasizing especially on the fact that the end of slavery is not the end of oppression, as the discrimination of poor people and racialized people has had been institutionalized. Um, and it's not even like at the time where white people, white farmers, or even slaves did not have at first any right, which is the major part, or any lands. Now it's not. I mean, it's not before it was like human rights means because you don't have basic human rights, you can't have enough money because you don't own land, you don't even have freedom. But now it's kind of reversed. Now because you don't have money, you basically lack in you're kind of I don't know how to form it, but society it's harder to be in society. Um I mean um without like without talking about even enslavement, if we look at US society today, we can see that it's especially cruel to its poor people because things like health or education have a large cost. And after US society mantra is about meritocracy. But the thing is, with this pattern, meritocracy is like a 50 meters race where rich people and privileged people start 30 meters ahead of all of the other people. So this is what we think.
Okay. So I'm going to then let's see if I can do this again. If I can go to Cyber Campus, and there was a problem this morning. I couldn't set up new votes. It just wouldn't let me. They would say, "There's a problem. Contact administrator." And of course, I don't know if anybody's going to come in and fix these things. And by the way, if there's a problem in submitting your midterm paper, your paragraphs, I should say, for your Friday classes, if you're in my Friday classes by Thursday morning, please send them to me by email if you can't post them for whatever reason. So let me see here. We go here I don't know if this is going to work. It might not because again, I kept getting this failure message before we started class today. And let's see, vote anonymously, pro, con, and neutral. And of course, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So let's see if it works here, save, and it goes, oh, it worked. Okay, vote one more time anonymously to see if there's any change in the class sentiment on the topic by voting now one more time on this topic. So let's see if there's any change here. And you have until 10 o'clock. So is anybody going to be neutral? Is anybody going to be con? We have four pro, and so I'll let you do that. Uh, and that's it for today. Okay. So we go here then to stop share and close the class. And then, yes.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt sooner, but as I came like 2 minutes late, I didn't have the attendance number in the chat, so I missed the attendance number.
Okay. All right. So that's all then for today. All right. Bye.